My days working, taking care of my little ones can be a lot. I checked out care.com and it was so easy for me to find local, experienced, and background check sitters. Finding our babysitter was way more affordable than I thought. Care.com makes it super easy. Search for qualified candidates. You can view their profiles, read reviews and ratings, check their availability, send messages directly, and get the help that you need. Care.com should be every person's go-to.
I'm Tim Fitzgerald at GoPowerCat.com.
And I'm Scott Jason with Fog.net.
This is a replay of WIBW's TV show, The Drive.
Here's this week's episode on the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network.
Good evening, Wildcat and Jayhawk fans, and welcome to The Drive, sponsored by FlintHillsAuto.com. I'm Tim Fitzgerald of GoPowerCat.com, and the man to my right is Scott Jason of Fog.net. And Scott, everybody's happy.
What a week. You know, we are taping this before the Chiefs game, so there is still time for maybe a miracle tonight.
I don't even care about the Chiefs after that K-State and KU double fecta.
Unbelievable. Double fecta?
I think it was like a trifecta, but I took it away. Difecta?
It was pretty good. Crazy football games this week.
It was very impressive wins by both, and you can interact with us on social media at facebook.com/The Drive Show, on Twitter at The Drive 13, and of course answer our weekly poll question and make your game predictions over at thedriveshow.com. And remember, if you ever miss an episode of The Drive, you don't have to cry anymore. You can listen to an audio-only version that will appear each Monday morning in the form of a podcast at GoPowerCat.com and Fog.net.
You can cry if you want to. You can cry if you want to. Let them know.
And a little bit later, I'll be giving out Scott's phone number, so you can just text him for updates on KV Sports. We will start things off with our 2-minute drill. We do it every week. Our 2-minute drill is sponsored by Hula Hands. They've been expecting you. Now let's eat.
Well, a few outside, the Kansas State football program gave K-State much of a chance to beat the 5th-ranked Oklahoma Sooners, but the Wildcats played their best football maybe in years to beat the Sooners 48-41. Fitz, how did the Wildcats pull this one off?
I don't know. I really never saw this coming. You know, you play the game, and I do my 5 keys to victory, and, you know, I laid out the road map that it would take, and it was like this little narrow winding road to get to the victory, and they did it. They did everything they needed to do in this game. And what was crazy about this game, Scott, is this wasn't a case of K-State getting a bunch of fluke plays and getting a bunch of breaks, and they were just a better team. It was remarkable to watch how good the game plan was, how good Skylar Thompson was in this game, and how they did absolutely everything they needed. Skylar Thompson ran for 4 touchdowns. He threw the ball with great accuracy. He threw it into some tight windows you really don't see him do very often. But there's a couple stats in this game that kind of put things into focus. The third quarter, that vaunted Oklahoma offense ran 6 plays and gained 12 yards. 12 yards in the entire third quarter, and K-State started racking up points. Also, OU got out to a 17-7 lead and then scored the final 18 points of the game. Kansas State in the middle of the game outscored Oklahoma 41-6. And if not for the fortune of an OU player touching the ball before it went 10 yards on an onside kick, it would have gotten very interesting at the end as OU made a frantic rally. And of course, K-State ended up with the ball, ran out the clock, and everybody in Manhattan was happy. And I still am absolutely amazed this happened. This was a tremendous performance. It's like everything kind of came together. Everything they've been struggling with got better. They tackled better. They ran the ball better. Skylar Thompson was better. If this is the team we're going to see from now on with K-State, they're going to be really good.
And you know, I think back to when Les Miles coached Oklahoma State. They beat Oklahoma in his first year, and it was one of those games where it's, you know, all of a sudden, what's going on here? This coach might have something, even in a year that obviously started exceptionally, then maybe wasn't going the way that K-State fans would have hoped. And now you have a couple wins like this, you have a couple games. I think it makes the future, it makes it apparent that the future is bright with Chris Kleiman.
K-State's now 5-2 and 1 win from being bowl eligible, so that's pretty remarkable. Kansas football came back from down 17 against Texas Tech to pick up the first Big 12 win of the Les Miles era. It is not Les Miles, Scott. You try to lie to me. How did Les Miles put it all together?
Unbelievable. I mean, down 17-0. The first throw of the game was an interception on a reverse, or a fake reverse. It was one of those games where you see it getting out of hand. You say, oh, maybe Texas Tech, this team that took Baylor to double overtime, and I think out-dueled Oklahoma State, and maybe this team's just a little bit better than everyone's been giving him credit for. And Brent Dearman, the new offensive coordinator, we will talk about him later, but you have to mention him now because of what that offense did and how he has been described to me as someone who schemes up based off what the opponent's weakness is. He has a play sheet, he's not reading off it. He's looking at what you're doing, and then he's going to adjust his calls. In this game, it was the deep ball. Kansas had 4 plays, for all intents and purposes, 4 touchdowns of 48 or more yards. Now, one of them was a 53-yard pass to Stephon Robinson, where the referee said he was tackled at the 1-yard line. KU actually stood around. They were expecting review because it looked pretty obvious that he was in the end zone. They ended up having to burn a timeout because there was never a review. Ultimately, no review. Quarterback sneak, next play touchdown. So it didn't matter much, but it was kind of a wacky play given that it just looked like that he had got into the end zone. But a KU defense that struggled all game got stops at the very end when they needed it, and a special teams unit now that for 2 straight weeks has had kicks blocked, multiple kicks blocked in back-to-back weeks. Got the break of the century. Texas Tech player tries to lateral it, and the ball comes right back to Kansas. But it's so fascinating what this offense is doing right now, especially considering, you look early in the year, you look at that Boston College game, Kansas had Khalil Herbert then. He was their top rusher. Right. You took one of the most talented players off of the offense. You changed offensive coordinators. 2 games in, 48 points in game 1, all 48 coming on offense, by the way, 37 in game 2, and that offense was moving the ball. Texas Tech had a 3rd and 1, I want to say around its own 34-35 with a few minutes left in the game. And I said at the time, Texas Tech cannot afford to give this ball back to Kansas. It's 4th and 1 on your own 30. You have to go for it because Brent Dearman's offense is going to score points. You're not going to get a stop. Brent Dearman marched down the field and scored. Carter Stanley marched down the field and scored with Brent Dearman obviously calling the plays. Unbelievable performance.
I have this strange thing about sports, and I think sometimes you get this kind of mojo about your program. We saw it early in Bill Snyder when all those bad breaks Kansas State went through for so many years, all of a sudden they were good breaks. And I can't explain it. It's almost like a spiritual belief. But what happened with Kansas to help them win that game, a blocked kick that is picked up and then lateral, fumbled, recovered for another attempt, that's unexplainable. That's just incredible. That's exactly the kind of stuff that happened to Kansas for so many years, and now they benefited from it. And maybe it's going to start happening to Texas Tech because I can't explain Texas Tech football.
Yeah, and one quote that really stood out after the game, Les Miles said that guy was trying very hard to score, and he maybe didn't mean much by it, but what that read to me was I don't think Texas Tech had confidence going into overtime. Matt Wells said after the game they didn't have confidence going for it on a 4th and 2 in the red zone. It seems like KU put some fear in them.
Yep, that's very interesting. It was upside down day in the Big 12. If you were ranked or favored, you lost. In addition to the Kansas schools winning, Texas lost at TCU, and Oklahoma State won at Iowa State. What does it say about the Big 12?
It's funny. I'm trying not to overreact to this week. I think there is good balance. I think there are some good teams in the conference. But again, what this read to me, specifically looking at that Texas game, this read to me again that it's still Oklahoma and everyone else. Maybe Baylor can creep in there, though. Yeah. Like, that's the one possibility I'll allow, as long as, I was thinking if they split with Oklahoma, they go to the Big 12 championship game, maybe they win that game, they lose to Oklahoma earlier on, maybe you start to look at this Baylor team and say, hey, there are 2 powers in the Big 12, and maybe they're a team that's going for the college football playoff at 12-1. They'd certainly have a great argument. I don't know, though. Like, even in a game where K-State schemed up plays in the run game, I would say, against Oklahoma and made them look like they haven't looked all year, I still look at that Oklahoma team and I still think they're the class of the conference and better than everyone else. So I think we learned a little. I think we learned the conference has some good depth, or maybe, continue to learn it, but I still think it's kind of that one team.
Well, it's weird that we're talking about this in a week that Oklahoma lost, but this week convinced me even more that Oklahoma's kind of the class of the conference. I don't think they'll lose again. I think K-State got their number, showed a pathway maybe how to beat them, but I don't think many teams in this conference are able to run the ball like K-State's capable of doing it. And Texas losing at TCU tells me Texas isn't separated from them, and neither is Iowa State losing at home to Oklahoma State, a team that has been up and down. So maybe it is Oklahoma and the other 9. Maybe Baylor can climb up in there. All I know out of this weekend is TCU never wear those football uniforms again. If you missed them, they put red in them for the blood that shoots out of horned frogs' eyes, if you didn't know. There was red on the helmets, the numbers were red, the uniforms were gray, the helmets were purple. It looked like a colorblind person was designing uniforms, and I don't mean that as an insult to colorblind people, but they can't see colors. That's why they're called colorblind.
Yeah, you see what happens is K-State gets cool new uniforms. Chris Kleiman comes in, and now Fitz is lecturing the entire conference on their uniforms.
You got it. Now a quick look at your poll question results. And poll questions are brought to you by Feldman 11, your go fast, look good, play hard custom shop.
Well, last week's question was...
Here it is. No.
Well, here are the results. The question was about how many points Kansas football would score against Texas Tech following the game against Texas. They put up 48. 20% of respondents got this one right. They said 35 plus. That was D. The top vote, the top answer was that 25 to 34 range. They just eclipsed that with that last
80% of you didn't believe in Brent Dearman. Didn't believe. This week's question is this: whether the departure is for a new job, that's a key in this question, retirement, or being fired, who will coach at the respective programs the longest? A vast array of choices. A, Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. B, Les Miles at Kansas. KU fans, is Chris Kleiman going to take another job and Les Miles stays longer at Kansas? I don't know. You tell us. Vote at thedriveshow.com.
Denver Broncos going to hire Les Miles after this season continues to spiral.
Yes. I believe it.
That's the John Elway way. Well, that will do it for this half of the 2-minute drill, but we will be right back with more on KU and K-State on The Drive.
Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. You start to sweat. Your friends start to turn on you. You're forced to go on a last-second drink run and end up missing the game-winning touchdown while in line. Terrifying, isn't it? Luckily, you can avoid the drama with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your watch party. Compare prices across multiple stores in your area, find the best deals on game day drinks, and get back to armchair quarterbacking from, you guessed it, your armchair. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Welcome back to The Drive as we continue our weekly 2-minute drill. The 2-minute drill is sponsored by Hula Hands. They've been expecting you. Now let's eat.
Well, K-State played its first exhibition basketball game on Friday night, easily handling Emporia State. Fitz, what did you learn about Bruce Weber's 8th K-State team?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I've been warning people that this might be kind of not really rebuilding, but a retooling year. I certainly don't agree with the prediction of 9th place in the conference. They unveiled the Big 12 Conference Champions banner that they will hang up in the rafters or at Bruce Weber's house, one of the two. And Kansas State did lose some key components, and they brought in 3 freshmen that they're relying on to give them quality minutes. And everyone's been talking about Dejuan Gordon as the guy. He's going to probably start. Eventually, it'll work out that way at one of the guard spots. And here's what was amazing about this first game. He was the least impressive, although he didn't look bad, of the 3 freshmen. The most impressive was the other Gordon, Antonio Gordon, the 6'9" power forward / shooting machine. I'm now the president of the Antonio Gordon fan club, or AG3 fan club, as we like to call it in the club. He was really impressive, and maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was that first game against Emporia State. But the kid can shoot the ball from the outside. He hit a number of 3-pointers. He also is strong around the rim. He's just really impressive. And Montavious Murphy, who has to put some muscle mass on, another 6'9" true freshman, needs to get stronger, a little meaner, still had a double-double in the contest. Emporia State's kind of rebuilding themselves, so it's kind of hard to say where the team really is. But I kind of got a good feeling about this Kansas State team. I still don't think they have enough parts to really be competitive in the upper echelon of the Big 12. But they indeed, as I've been projecting, are kind of looking at being a bubble team. I thought they were 5, 6, 7 in there. But depending on how the rest of this conference sorts out, Kansas State could really be in the mix in that upper part of the conference. I don't think they'll compete for the 3rd Bruce Weber title, but this was a hopeful sign but it's way too early.
Yeah, well, considering what they have coming in and recruiting too, I think that's moving in the right direction for Kansas State. What do you think, or how far would, even a bubble appearance in the NCAA tournament, making one of those, being one of the last 4 in, how much would that mean to this program?
It would mean a ton, and I think this probably is an NIT team, but they get rolling. Xavier Sneed looked really impressive. Cartier Jada, if he steps up and has a big season, K-State could be a pretty darn good team. I know this, they're going to be entertaining. Those big guys are really athletic and got up and down the court.
A couple names you'll recognize too.
Yep. The Kansas basketball team played its first exhibition game last Thursday, and the offense really struggled at times against an overmatched Fort Hays State team. But they're the Tigers, and they're ferocious. Scott, what went wrong for KU, and are there early warning signs for these Jayhawks?
Well, the marquee matchup between the Jayhawks and Tigers, the first of 7 years those two teams. No, I'm just kidding about that Missouri thing. But no, Kansas's problems this year, or what may cause these problems, surround what you saw early on. One of the first shots of the game at Jalen Wilson, I want to say 3-pointer. And look, if the Jayhawks shoot the ball well, it's going to open up a lot of things inside because they have talented big men who don't stretch the floor well and maybe will struggle to play alongside each other. But the question mark right now is what Kansas does at the 4 spot, because you want to put your best players on the floor. And if you're building the best lineup of this team, it probably has Udoka Azubuike and Silvio De Sousa on it, at least in a vacuum if you're looking at who are your 5 best players and, less about, well, what fit and what matchup. Here's the problem, is when it comes to defense at the 4 spot, KU gave up 3-point attempts. I think they gave up a bunch of makes. Bill Self highlighted that after the game, specifically from that 4 spot. And this isn't overreacting to one exhibition game. Bill Self was talking about this at Big 12 Media Day. He was talking about this at KU Basketball Media Day. He has been talking about this for a long time. The way college basketball has gone, 4 guards beats too big when talent is equal, because it's extremely difficult for that second big man to stay with that 4th guard. Defensively is where that matchup kills you. Even if that big man is feasting inside and scoring on post-ups, hitting 60% of his shots, well, 60% of his shots isn't counteracting the 40% of 3-point shots that you'll give up on the other end. It's math, it's analytics, it's numbers. A lot of people don't like it in basketball, but it has created this issue where, again, 4-guard lineups become more efficient, especially offensively, and then defending that 4-man. So KU does have a problem. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of work it out. Bill Self has mentioned zone, which, if you know Bill Self, he does not like playing zone, especially early in the season, but he said they're already working on it because they have to figure out a way to get these guys on the floor.
To recap, KU's problem is they have too many good players. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And now we step out of bounds.
Well, we're not going very far out of bounds this week for our topic, but it's the Sunflower Showdown this Saturday in Lawrence. Both football teams are coming off milestone wins for their first-year coaches. Fitz, how big is this game for both programs?
Well, I don't want to go back to '95 when both teams were ranked and there was really some substance to that game, but it kind of has that feeling, maybe that both teams are looking for a signature win. Look, there was another coach at Kansas State, I don't know if you know this, in the middle of the Bill Snyder era. We don't like to mention his name in Manhattan, but he beat a lot of teams. He won at Texas when they were in the top 10 and then lost every season he was in Manhattan to KU. So Chris Kleiman knows this. You can't lose to KU. You've got to win the rivalry games. But Les Miles knows there's no better way to flip the storyline in the University of Kansas football program than beating K-State in year 1. There's going to be a lot of passion about this game. A lot of times you go into this game, Scott, and it's almost like what KU and K-State basketball used to be. The better team was also the more engaged team, and it got ugly. Now, basketball's kind of evened out a little bit, and football might be getting there. This is going to be a really interesting Saturday afternoon in Lawrence.
Yeah, I think this first one certainly will be, and you look at what it could do for the Kansas football team. Bowl eligibility was the hope coming into the year, the loss to Coastal Carolina. I know it was week 2, but that really put a damper on it. Those are the games, that game, the West Virginia game, you really have to win those games if at the end of the year you want to be looking at 6 wins. Now again, this is a Kansas team that hasn't won 4 games in a decade, so I think 4 wins would also be seen as a tremendous amount of progress. So that takes you to the Kansas State game. Is it winnable for Kansas? Sure, I absolutely think it is. I think Kansas's offense is moving in the right direction, and the players really want to send these seniors out with some type of success. I think the Sunflower Showdown will be, I expect the atmosphere to be absolutely crazy. I think it'll be the most attended KU game of the year, at least at home. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I do think K-State's very good, though.
Now let's hear from the fans. And our fan question this week is, do I have to be worried about Brent Dearman taking another job at the end of the year? The Kansas offense looks unreal. Teddy and Lawrence asked that. It doesn't actually look unreal. It looks really real to me.
Yeah, it looks really good is the way I would put it. And look, it's still early. It's 2 games in 3 weeks into his tenure as offensive coordinator, but a $0 reported buyout if he takes a job to be an FBS head coach. Only $500,000 if he leaves to be an assistant somewhere else. Only for some of these teams. I mean, Matt Wells of Texas Tech, I believe his buyout was $800,000 to go be the head coach at Texas Tech from Utah State. So teams have paid that out before. I don't know if you should be concerned yet, but if they keep scoring 37 and 48 every week, someone's going to give him money, whether it's KU or someone else. Remember to ask us your questions on our Facebook page and on Twitter at TheDrive13. And when we return, we will look at our predictions here on The Drive.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
Welcome back as we head down the home stretch of this week's show. Now it's time to take a look at our predictions. The predictions are brought to you by Vanderbilt, your work boot center. And remember to make your weekly predictions at thedriveshow.com. Now let's look at last week's results. I don't want to talk about it. The viewers went 2-1. I am consistently 1-2. Scott went 2-1. I keep getting worse as we go into the season, and I keep getting K-State wrong. Now, here are this week's picks. Let's start with West Virginia, a 17-point underdog at Baylor. That's a lot of points.
Yeah.
I think West Virginia is going to cover that. I think they'll lose, but not by 17.
Yeah, I've gone against Baylor way too much. I'm going to go against Baylor one more time, though, West Virginia. Next up, TCU plus 6.5 at Oklahoma State.
I am going to say Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State by a touchdown.
See, this is reactionary. You know what I mean? They played well last week. They'll probably go home and lose. This is why I stink at this, people.
Yeah.
I put no thought into it. In our last game of the week, I bet you can guess. It's K-State. Right now, as we record this, a 6-point favorite at Kansas.
Well, hold on. I'm taking TCU just to get my pick on the record.
I'm
Thanks,
sorry.
Fitz, running over it. Kansas State at Kansas. I will roll with the Brent Dearman offense. I will take Kansas plus 6.
K-State fans have been telling me, please don't take K-State. I've gone against them 2 weeks in a row and missed. But I've gotten Kansas right. So there's your quandary.
Yeah.
I'm going to K-State. They will win by more than 6. I apologize if I screw this up for K-State fans. Again, make your picks over thedriveshow.com. And now it's time for our On the Clock segment. On the Clock is sponsored by Carpet One. Buy local for a strong local community. And we start with this guy over here, Scott Chasen of Fog.net.
Well, Kansas and Missouri have agreed to play again. The border war is back. Seems like it might be going that direction in football too, but for now it's basketball. It's 6 games. I know there are a lot of people who have thoughts on it, both positive, some negative. Some people really don't want this game. They don't see what it does for Kansas. Look, it's excitement in college basketball. It's a rivalry that a lot of people care about, evident by my Twitter mentions and just about anyone else who's chimed in on this. People really do care about these games. And Bill Self, I thought it was interesting talking to him that he said he really missed the game. He said he's previously said they wouldn't do it unless it was good for Kansas, so he obviously believes there is some benefit, or people in the athletic department do, Jeff Long, whoever that may be. But Bill Self said he misses these games. He'll get his chance to coach in them again. It should be a fantastic atmosphere. Sprint Center in Columbia, in Lawrence. It should be fun.
Well, that should be great. I'd love to see Kansas State and Wichita State play every year, but apparently Wichita State, ironically, now has not wanted to do it. Look, you got to trust the process. It's a great sports cliche, but it's also real. You're seeing the process with K-State football, and this year will be part of the process with K-State basketball as Bruce Weber retools. Just trust the process. It may not be great this season, but I think better years will await both programs next year. That's it for this week's edition of The Drive. We'll see you next week right here and all week on social media.
This weekend, CBS has 2 big days of college basketball. Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, get the scoop on college hoops with Inside College Basketball, followed at 1 p.m. Eastern by San Diego State taking on Boise State. Then on Sunday at noon Eastern, it's a Big Ten battle between Michigan State and Maryland. That's all this weekend on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.